Alrighty, last but certainly not least. Proud to introduce Fen Labalme, who'll be presenting on transforming government compliance. Fen Labalme, CISSP, has been involved with data security and personal privacy for decades, starting with his 1981 MIT thesis of an electronic newspaper that foresaw problems with personalization if privacy was ignored, Newspeak. Today, Fen is the Chief Information Security Officer for Civic Actions and is working to bring agile, free, and open source security to government agencies fettered with antiquated, static cybersecurity compliance requirements. Fen's goal for this year is to enable general purpose authority to operate, otherwise known as ATO, authorizations in 2 weeks, where currently this process takes agencies from 9 months to 3 years. Please welcome Fen.
Well, that's great. He just gave half my talk. I forgot that those were all in the introduction. So we can all go home now. So basically, transforming government compliance is something that, actually, transforming government is something that I'm very interested in too. And transforming government compliance is something that we need to do. Watching a lot of these talks, industry, private sector compliance is way ahead of government. Government has still got a bunch of check boxes. And so I'm going to give some background on that, and then talk a little bit about what we're doing to try to make the process more automated. So yeah, I just gave the table of contents. How we got here, what is Civic Actions, the company I work for, what is compliance, endpoint security is improving, we're seeing that, I'm really happy to say, and then the automated SSP creation and next steps. I've always had interested in security even before the thesis. I met Ron Rivest and Eddie Shamir, the RNS from RSA, back when they were introducing public key cryptography, and wrote my thesis on personalized social media with privacy. Got involved with the EFF, was a founding member of the Cypherpunks, did a lot of things with P3. Platform for privacy preferences with the W3C and a bunch of other things over a bunch of years. But then I got involved with Civic Actions. Civic Actions is working to try to make the greater good. For the first 10 years, we were working at empowering people at the edges, working at making nonprofits that we liked work better. We were founded in Berkeley. We are 100% remote. We're also 100% free and open source software. Our first clients were people like Amnesty International and Greenpeace. And then in 2014, we decided, let's think about transforming government and see if we can take government and make it work better for people, make better products for them, and help them do things that we all would like government to do. It's interesting transferring from Amnesty International to our first client, which was the DoD, but it was the DSCA, which is the Defense Security Cooperation Agency. If there is a Department of Peace in the Department of Defense, it's probably this group. They measure their successes by conflicts avoided. And we grew from 35 to 75 people since we did that. We've got a bunch of clients now. Some of the clients that I'm involved with are DSCA, Department of Education, Health and Human Services, NSF, also Veterans Affairs, and the GSA is our newest client. So federal compliance origins. I'm going to again briefly go over this so I can save some time at the end for talking about where we're going. It's kind of started in 2002 when the government realized that their systems were getting hacked into and FISMA became law, the Federal Information Security Management Act. And that was the first time that they actually codified, or maybe not the first time, but the time that it became a law that people actually had to make systems that met a certain amount of compliance. And they set the bar with pretty high at the time, with approximately 300 security controls, and you had to actually show that your system meets these with checking boxes. And then they would grant you a authority to operate, which would let you say that your system is now secure for the next 3 years. This was in 2002. Not much has changed since then, which is really kind of scary. There has been a lot of things. The DIACAP came out. The 837, which is the risk management framework, really changed the way that those 300 controls were set up. Continuous monitoring was introduced in 2011, and the Department of Homeland Security brought up the concept of continuous diagnostics and mitigation, but a lot of people consider that continuous. They think the CNM stands for continuous monitoring. It's a good thing, except for the fact that it basically puts HBSS and ACAS systems into your system. It's designed for Windows. These are McAfee agents that go into your system. We're all open source, so we're running Red Hat Linux and Ubuntu. And so these have to get kind of put into our system. They're the only software that I can't look at and see what's going on. The last speaker just said that the EPO, e-policy orchestrator, that pushes software down actually has been used to push malware. This is one of my fears. Basically, what we need is open for any kind of continuous monitoring system. There should be open protocols and open data formats. Anything less, if it's completely closed, you can't trust it. There should be reference applications on GitHub that you can see and modify and change. That's just the beginning. And actually, we are working on. I'm actually working with the DHS. I can't believe I'm working with the Department of Homeland Security, but I'm working with the DHS to try to make some of these changes because they're realizing that these systems do need to be open. The next versions of their security asset management systems are going to have an API also, so that we can actually write into them. FISMA modernization came, didn't really modernize anything. The DICAP decided it's going to start using the risk management framework, and 853, you may have heard of it. This is the version that came out that really became the Bible of everyone doing government compliance. I know this 853 way too well right now. So what is this compliance? When we started doing government work, we needed a CISO. And I was the last person to take a step backwards, and I jumped into the role. I wrote, one of the first things I did was write an SSP, system security plan for the DSCA, and it was a 400-page Word document. That's what they wanted. I tried to give them code. I tried to get them to look at Git. They wouldn't look at it. It was a book of monsters. And not only was it a book of monsters, but it's based on the RMF, which, besides the 853, all the documents that it points to, I'm trying to remember, I should know the name of the man who actually counted the pages, but it's about 6,000 pages of compliance documentation. So nobody even reads, the SSP, and nobody reads the documentation that goes into it. So I learned, one thing I did learn is compliance is not security. And probably a lot of you know this. So the government actually began figuring it out, started updating risk management. They've done some good work. The OMB circular A130 doesn't spin off the mouth as well as 853, I don't think. But it was the first place that really mentioned ongoing authorization. They don't want the authorization to be one time every 3 years, but they want it to be continuously checked. And they also mentioned interoperability among tools, and I obviously did not have interoperability among tools because it fell off the back when I exported this presentation. But we use some of the tools we use are things like OpenSCAP, Docker, Chef and Spec, Ansible. There's a lot of open source tools that can be used as a baseline for getting started. Also, Open Control is, which I'll talk about in a few moments. The NIST cybersecurity framework is something that works inside the in the private sector. If you don't know about this, it's been talked. I've heard several talks bring it up. It's extremely good. It's really well-written language. CEOs can read it and understand it. I recommend you ask your CEO to read it. And it's something that can be done completely without government intervention. You can do it yourself, and it's a really, really good set of commands. Also, as was mentioned, the CIS security framework benchmarks are really good. And the RMF v2, just in December, the version 2 of the RMF came out, and that is also aiming more towards the public sector. It's taken out the word federal. It's it's emphasizing privacy more. And And also bringing up the concept of the information lifecycle, really realizing that they've got to look at information from the time it's created to the destruction, the entire life cycle of information. So I'm really as any security researcher knows, endpoint security is improving if you remember to change your passwords from admin. But there's still a lot of work to do because the way you tell the government that you're actually secure is by using these 300, 400-page Word documents. Also, cybersecurity scope is rapidly increasing. Systems are virtualizing and moving to the cloud. The cybersecurity framework is moving into the boardroom. The GDPR, which has a lot of changes, both the GDPR and the CCPA are both bringing up a lot of privacy requirements for users to make sure that people know how their information is being used and collected. Very important stuff. What's going on is, well, in user interface design, people understand responsive design. They realize that you have to build a system that works for every kind of platform. What we also need is responsive security and agile security mechanisms, and the government doesn't really get that. They still are stuck in a one-size-fits-all. So the work that we're working on is automating the system security plan. This is sort of the back end, but we're actually having hooks into the front end of actually hooking into the CI/CD pipeline, shifting left the process of security into the developers area so that when the developers make changes, they can help make changes that will feed through and into the security plan. Oh, wrong direction. So it starts with machine-readable files that we store in Git. They're called open control. Open control looks like this, and I don't think I have a pointer. But what we see here is this is the risk assessment family, risk assessment number 1, which is a policy. We see that it's from the standard key NIST 853, and has a text underneath. The department follows risk assessment policy and procedures, formally documented, ... This is machine-readable code. For a policy one like this, it'll probably be written by a person and not written by the computer. But it can also be turned into using an editor like HyperGRC, which is a free system available online. You can see on the left it has the actual guidance from 853. Then it has the controls. The control for risk assessment number 1 has 3 parts to it. Part of it comes from AWS. Its system partially inherits it. Part of it comes from Civic Actions, the contractor working on it. Part of it comes from Lynx, the client. And you can actually see the department follows the risk assessment policy and procedures coming directly from the YAML. We also want reusable components. Because when you build something, if you build something on AWS, you're probably going to, if you have 5 systems on AWS, they're all going to inherit the same things from AWS. You shouldn't have to write the same section of code, the same section of your system security plan over and over again. So when we did the system security plan for this client, we created 5 major components, 1 for AWS, 1 for Civic Actions, 1 for Drupal, 1 for the organization, and 1 for the privacy overlay. Each one of these right now is static, but we're currently in the process of templatizing them so that we can push them out and put them on GitHub and make them available to anyone. This is just a quick look at the AWS component. You can see AC1, AWS, if I click, this is not live unfortunately, but an AC1, this is something that's partially inherited. AC2 is also partially inherited. But for the Drupal component, AC1 is not involved because the policy is not part of Drupal. But Drupal does actually define very clearly, very specifically, Part A, Part D, and Part G of account management. By the way, I realize I'm talking really fast, and if anyone ever has any questions at any point, please feel free. So we've got these YAML files, and the next step what we want to do is do automated evidence collection. When an authorizing official from the government wants to see your system security plan, what they want to do is they want to see evidence, and the evidence in the past has been screenshots. Take a screenshot, it's crazy. They take a screenshot of the page that's showing the configuration of a system, and they're happy. That's what I used in that first SSP. Here's an example for if the password must be at least 14 characters, maybe it needs to be more. Actually, this has just changed where now this client needs 16 characters. The evidence at the bottom, it says attach evidence. Right now, we're manually attaching the evidence, but we're building the back end so we can have scripts that go out, check the configuration, see that it's looking at 16 characters, pull it in, and then we can verify that over against the baseline and pop up a green light that we're meeting this control, or pop up a red light if we're not meeting the control. This page just shows that we can also do diffs between controls. Under RA5 Part A in the middle, you can see AWS does not contribute to that, but the Acquia ACE built on AWS does. So we can take any two sets of components and do a diff between them. If we have time afterwards, I can actually show some of this working. We want sharing of control information. We'll be putting ours out in both open control and an OSCAL format on our GitHub site. I was hoping to have it done by today, or out there by today. It'll be another week. So that week is probably 3 weeks, but but it'll be out there soon. So it'll be out in open control format, which open control was started, if I didn't mention it before, it was created by Pivotal and 18F, and now there's a small group of very excited people working on it. But there's also this group called OSCAL coming from NIST, and it's hard to say, but there's a lot of overlap between OSCAL and open control. The open control community is a little dismayed that the OSCAL people didn't come to us and say, what are you doing, how can we extend it? And they just started their own thing. But OSCAL looks really good, and I think I have an example of some automated document creation with both. This is a document created from our open control. This is actually RA5 vulnerability scanning, which again has at the top the guidance, and underneath the AWS component and a links component. One of the great things that you can do with Markdown, fortunately, is there's a great script called Pandoc that will turn this into a Microsoft Word, and that's again before you upload it, before you give it to the AOs, they want Microsoft Word. For what we're experimenting with OSCAL is OSCAL has a format for keeping track of the information for what's called the front matter. The front matter is the introduction, the system name, the points of contact, the system description, the technical description, federal rules and regulations. There's about 13 things. I'm only showing 1, 2, and 9 here because that's as far as we've gotten so far. But the format that OSCAL has these in is in YAML. And so with this YAML file that we got from the OSCAL community, we created a document which has a template for taking that OSCAL. If you see in this template, actually, let me go back. We can see at the top there's system name, data.gov multi-tenant system, and description underneath with base low and selected low. These goes into the template, and we get up near the top. You can see the system name, I think, and you can see the information types. with the General Services Administration and the confidentiality, integrity, and availability low. So we're actually hoping to be able to manage multiple systems with this one template and different YAML files coming in. Trying to cut the time from a year to 2 weeks. And I think we might get our first 2 weeks down. We might get there this year. My next one I think is going to take about 4 weeks. So basically, security demands agility. We need to not use the just pure compliance systems that exist right now, but use systems that are machine readable, can be written and read by the machines, can connect with the developers so that developers can, as they make changes, they can see that their change is going to break. We're very used to QA and the CI/CD pipeline. We need to move security into the CI/CD pipeline. It's part of the next steps. And boy, I felt like I was late, and so I went fast. But that's it. That's for this talk. I can show a little bit of HIPPA GRC, I think. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, the question is in NIST documentation in the 853. There's a lot of places that say things like the password length must be by organizational, and then it has square brackets, organizational defined amounts, or things have to be checked by organizational amount times. Those values will all be in YAML files, and so that we'll pull those from the YAML file and feed them into the templates and create documentation. Absolutely. The question is, when we're working on this, if we see that a control doesn't really make sense, are we trying to take a look at that control and change it? Also, the thing is that if there's a control, if there's a new threat that exists that's not in the control system at all, none of our federal clients care about that because it's not in a checkbox. We're looking at creating a community online in GitHub where people are making changes and updating these things regularly. Our contacts at the DoD are now interested in hearing about this, and they're seeing a demo in 2 weeks. And they're going to have some people from the DHS there, and that's really who has to be there because the Department of Homeland Security is going to be the ones that push it down. Problem is that there's a big cultural change too. And right now there is the law, and the law is FISMA. And until that law gets changed, and it's really probably going to have to come from the president. And I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon, but we are making inroads with the DoD and with DHS, and I think that's, and the Department of Education listens. They've been following what's going on. So those things may start trickling down. And I think it's going to happen. I think I'll start seeing things this year, but it won't probably actually trickle down for a couple years because we've got a lot of cultural changes to make. Let me see if I can. I'm going to see if I can bring up. HIPPA GRC. Yeah, this is HyperGRC. Can I take this off? Yeah. This is HyperGRC. I've got a bunch of different things in here right now. I'm an OpenShift platform. Freedonia is something you can download from Open Control. Department of Education, Health and Human Services, examples. One of the better, let me go to the General Services Administration one here. And a lot of this is already on GitHub. So if we look at coming to well, actually this isn't passwords, but control implementation, well, you can see this is exactly what you were talking about over here. Organizational defined auditable events, and then the organization defines the auditable events are failed login attempts, successful login attempts, et cetera. These aren't defined by the organization here, they're defined by CCAN, the app. But, and we're actually, because of that, thinking of moving this to the organization section. The code for this is it's what's nice is this is starting to come together where I can actually use it. And I was hoping to actually have a more full-fledged demo for this, but next year.
So I've read about the NIST IR 8011. It's about the automation of this. Basically, what you're talking about here, I was wondering if that's what has influenced what you're doing, or you're contributing to that. It's about an automation for compliance framework.
And that I think is the OSCAL framework that the NIST is pushing. Yeah. And we, in true DevOps fashion, we don't like the documentation as much as we like the code. And so we're actually trying to, we're using the code that comes out of OSCAL, and we're making our code work with both OSCAL and Open Control. Automation is a part for community. I'll look it up. That was automation control for security control assessments. Well, thank you.